Hello everyone, it is Walt here, bringing you another interesting self-help series here on this channel. And this one is Stuart Wilde's. If you've heard of like any kind of self-help work and you really start to get into it, you're pretty quickly, I would say, going to come across Stuart Wilde. And some people really love his work. I mean, I really love it. Some people find it a little bit too woo-woo. It's got some stuff that's a little bit hard to comprehend, hard to interpret at times. So that's kind of something that kind of pushes people away from some of his work. But, you know, here I am kind of going to give an entirely scientific perspective on it, just kind of looking at his material through a scientific lens, trying to say, okay, we can really believe this, or we can take this more metaphorically, kind of that direction of it. Anyway, regardless, this is Stuart Wilde's Infinite Self series, the 33, principles, 33 energies of taking back your power, basically. And here we are with our first part, where we're really just kind of introducing the series, kind of getting into what is it, what's it about, how do we, reclaim our freedom, how do we reclaim our power, what's that all about, how does this work, all those kind of good questions. So let's just really dive into it. What's up with this, who's Stuart Wilde, all that kind of stuff. So first off, he kind of tells his personal backstory a little bit in the beginning of this one. I mean, I'm personally going off the audio version of this. This is the audio version you can find on YouTube. It's only like 5.5 hours long. It's a really useful tool. I've listened to it maybe 5-10 times now because it's just, I find it really good. But yeah, that's kind of why we're doing a series on it in the first place. So, I mean, like, doy, right? Yeah, so the 33 energies, I mean, like, this first part's a little bit hard to introduce because he covers a lot of different things in it. First off, he goes through his backstory of how he started off growing up as a kid in Africa, and then how he moves up to England, like, to an old English boarding school that he calls, like, this mausoleum that's as old as time. And there he is up there for from the age of like 11 to 17, just dealing with restriction and people being all like tough on him and having to like do this and do this and do this. And then how he goes on to being rich. He talks about this in some of his other work of getting rich in the jeans business, making over $20,000 a week in a time where that might be, double what it is now, depending on your interpretation of the consumer price index and inflation rates. But still, and at the end of the 60s, the 1960s, where he was doing that kind of thing, making a huge amount of money. And that from an early age, just doing that, it was pretty toxic for him. It was something where he just overindulged in all the kind of drugs and sex and everything he could get a hold of. And that he felt like this by the age of 28, after almost like, dying from this experience or just being worn out by, burning out his serotonin or whatever there. Here he is, and he decides that he's going to become, more enlightened. So we go through the story then of how he throws away all his stuff to some degree. Kind of a crazy move, but it's always kind of a funny part to read there as he kind of just like throws his apartment key down a hole and stuff and gives away his business in order to take up like learning some spirituality, which he suffers from a little bit from throwing away all his stuff a little bit later on in some of his other works. At least he talks about that one. For example, the Little Money Bible. If you haven't read that, then check it out. All these kind of materials tend to be free on YouTube, so definitely worth a read. Otherwise you can buy stuff on Amazon or wherever. But yeah, so anywho, he goes through his story about how he throws away all this kind of stuff. And then afterwards, how he kind of goes and turns to Taoism. Taoism being one of the best kind of Eastern philosophies, I would say. I would even put it above Buddhism by a little bit, just because there's been a little less dogma getting stuck into some of your Taoist works, and there's a little less reincarnation getting stuck into it. But anyway, that's just kind of my take on Taoism. But he talks about how Taoism doesn't have any rules. It's something you can just kind of take up and either do or not do. And so it's only 81 paragraphs long in the Tao Te Ching, all that kind of stuff. Taoism is an absolutely wonderful philosophy, so like, him taking that perspective is obviously just a really good sign of his work. And he kind of dives into the fact that he talks a little bit about in the introduction about fringe dwellers, these people who basically don't really fit in. And they're the ones who would be listening to these kind of materials in the first place. They're everybody who doesn't feel like just completely conforming. He says that when the ego is kind of like at full, mast, when your ego is just in control, then we don't feel a need to change or to change anything because everything's going well according to the ego. And so he's saying that really there is no negative experience in our life. Okay, I think this one is absolutely huge. It's something I only recently realized, only 3 or 4 months ago, that really there are no negative experiences in our life. They're entirely just based on our expectations. And I only figured that out reading Trading in the Zone, that wonderful book by Mark Douglas, for the 8th time or something. That one really getting into the idea that, our expectations are really just our beliefs projected into the future, and our beliefs really set us up to either succeed or fail. So when we expect that we need to we have this expectation that everything needs to go perfectly, what perfectionism is, that's when we really get screwed over, because we expect, okay, it has to go perfectly, and then something doesn't go perfectly. Like he says, it's like you want to have a pain-free experience and you fall over and break your ankle. Then the negative experience is not just the pain you experience from that, but the fact that how could this reality betray me? So it's like we all have this ego that has a, not really ego in the term that Freud meant, but more of a common, day-to-day term of the ego being kind of a bit of the superego plus the id kind of combination, which is technically the ego, but regardless, just this really self-centered personality that takes on the idea that it has to be a god. So we all have this inner notion that everything should go exactly how we want it to. We should be able to snap our fingers and everything play out exactly how we want it to. So we all kind of have this notion of we're God and we can direct the entire universe with our total, omnipotence. And so he's saying that this is really the problem of the physical plane. And he talks about this idea of we all incarnate to the physical plane and we all take on these physical forms from being part of infinite intelligence, yada yada. I take that to be kind of his personal belief system, that we all are infinite energy and we all kind of are these infinite beings that he talks about in one of his other materials about how it's all kind of like a video game and how we all come down to the earth plane to play these characters where we're all just like sims, of our true life. And then after we die, we're going to be, these angelic creatures or this infinite energy or all part of the God force, all that kind of stuff. Take what you will out of that one. You can either believe it or not. It's a pretty picture to paint if you want to believe that you live forever, that everything's going to work out. If it helps you to do that, do that. If not, take a scientific approach and say that, we can't prove that any of that exists. We can't disprove it. So take what you want away from that. I'm not going to say that that's true. I'm not going to say it's false, okay? That's just kind of his take on it. And so he's really just going with that perspective that we all kind of incarnate to this form, and it's our best job to live our best lives and to create a better world. And so he thinks that the world is getting worse over time. I mean, that's a little debatable. If you look at economic growth, all that kind of stuff, we're actually getting better overall. But you can see there's some problems and people's attitudes. Some countries are getting worse and worse and worse. And, wealth, income inequality in some cases, all that kind of stuff. People could say the world's getting worse. You could say the world's getting better. Little debatable either way. Anyway, he takes the perspective the world's getting a little bit worse and that we can all change it by helping each other in terms of each of us becoming more enlightened in ourselves. So this takes a very Taoist, very Buddhist kind of philosophy of let's focus on ourselves, better ourselves, and then we're going to better fit into society. Instead of kind of the Abrahamic religion of you must all kind of conform to these rules in order to we're going to take all of our round pegs and make them squares and stick them into society and you all have to be the same and work this way. And then he's saying that most of us don't operate that way. We're fringe dwellers, at least the ones who are attracted to this kind of material. He says, you're weird, man. Everybody attracted to this kind of stuff is taking on a perspective of being on the fringes more so, being these dwellers of not just fitting in with the la-di-da of society. And I think you kind of have to be that way to listen to these materials and take it on, otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it. I think you'd be like, life's fine, I'm going to get back to my miserable existence as, the 9 to 5 or whatever. But when you're a fringe dweller, I think that's, a majority of us who do this kind of stuff, then it's a little bit different. Anyway, he says that we should use these materials, listen to our, 33, energies, 33 steps, actually do them, and then this will make our lives so much better. And for actually doing some of these materials, I have not I didn't dive super deep into all this kind of stuff enough. I mean, I've read it 5 to 10 times. I've done, quite a bit of the work, but I haven't done absolutely everything. So anyway, we're going to do this series. We're going to dive in. We're going to actually perform these principles. We're going to change some lives here. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys next time with the next part of our 33. It's not really a 33-part series since this is just the introduction, but The Infinite Self series by Stuart Wilde. So absolutely wonderful series, well introduced by Dr. Wayne Dyer for a reason, because this material is absolutely golden. So stay tuned. I'll give you guys the brief rundown for it, and we can help transform our own lives, the world's life, everybody's life. So stay tuned. I'll see you next time.